Donna, can you tell me a little bit about your clinical background?
I'm an Occupational Therapist Case Manager, having worked predominantly in traumatic brain injury for the last 20 years. Prior to that time, I was a nurse and also worked in community facilities, and I deal mainly with clients who live in rural locations. So a lot of the places that we go to and the communities we work with have limited resources to tap into.
Where do your referrals come from?
So the referrals generally come from the tertiary hospitals in the city. Because they're the major injury division, most people are airlifted to Melbourne or Sydney, or some sort of a rehab facility that specialises in care.
What is the process once you get that referral?
Having worked in the area for so long now, we really try to have that very early contact to start a discharge plan as soon as we know someone is there. And I think that's the key to it all running fairly smoothly at the other end. For me, it's about tapping into or starting to think about the resources that I already know are available in that area. So it's putting together a list of services and what we might need to outsource, clinicians who are visiting that area, whether they will feel comfortable dealing with the complexities of some of the cases, the education that might be needed to try and support them or upskill them to feel comfortable to take on that referral. The main thing, I think, is to keep that continuum of communication going between the referring hospital and the people who will be taking over the case on the ground.
So Donna, what makes a successful discharge?
The actual participant is sometimes forgotten in the whole discharge planning process. So I think, making sure that we are looking at what living in the community means to that person and incorporating their wishes and desires into that whole discharge plan. Things like having a home visit with photos or video footage of where the client will be going back to, or the community in fact, where they go to the local club to play lawn bowls or whatever. It's so important that everybody's on the same page with regards to what's this person's story. It's vital that there's no lag in service. So, sometimes if it means putting back a discharge, that's what we try and do, because discharging someone in the first instance on a Friday afternoon, I think it's a recipe for disaster. So making sure a discharge happens at the beginning of the week when services are on the ground, because otherwise skills, confidence is lost. If you can have a really solid understanding, again, of where that person's going back to, and if we use the example of scripts, if a person's not coming home with a Webster pack already packed, what do they do if they live 20 kilometres out of town and the nearest pharmacy is in another town again? You have to make sure that all the medication's right, ready to go, there's food in the house, that the person has access to heating or cooling. I think, again, this is where we become a little creative working in the rural settings, and often in the smaller towns you have a real community sense of everyone wants to help that person get back to their life. So this might be where the church ladies do a little bit of cooking for that person, and in one case I had to use a mail car to take a participant to a larger centre where they could access community transport to get to rehab appointments. So that was a fairly different sort of way to get people to and from what they needed to get on with their recovery. It's just a lot of pre-planning to make sure that all happens. I've got an example of a complex client who I would say the discharge planning would have been close to a year in the planning phase, of a fellow who had really early contact from the referring hospital to the staff on the ground back in his hometown. That included several trips from the hospital, visiting and doing a lot of education with local staff and giving them the skills and confidence to feel comfortable with managing that person. As a complex client, he has gone something like 4 years without an admission back into hospital. He's never had a pressure sore, which I think is an amazing achievement for someone who is minimally conscious. And then you may have someone who is a less complex client who is up walking and talking and doing all the things that we look at as, ticking the boxes for independence, and that transition might go very badly, where they may have no social supports, no family supports, and they go back to a country town, get depressed, have no resources to call on, and things are a disaster really. And I think they're the cases that sometimes you may become a bit complacent with putting that extra time in to make sure that everything is there if you need it, including mental health resources. I think that's a really important one to get in place right from the word go if you need it.